harm, and to become your loving self. I'm Dr. Bashirian, a licensed maritime family therapist, certified sexologist in full-time private practice. I'm here today with my best friend, my colleague, and my business partner, Dr. Robert Jaffe, which he couldn't join us last week. And a warm welcome to you. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here. And we are here today to talk about one of our favorite subjects, which is sex. And we all love talking about that. Not as much as doing it, but we love talking about it. Our sex, our sexuality, our relationships, and the things that we want in order to make us feel close and connected with other people. So we always dedicate this program to you, our listeners, and we want to let you know that you come into the world as your authentic, true sexual self. You come in with many wonderful qualities, and the qualities that you come in with, you can always think about and celebrate and discuss with others. We are all more alike than we are not alike, even though we love to focus on the differences. The truth is that we're much more alike than we are not alike. We all have the same kind of bodies with 2 arms and 5 fingers and on each hand and 5 toes on each foot. And we all have the same feelings, actually. We are able to all feel happy. We're all able to feel curious. We are able to feel calm. We all can get anxious. We all can get scared. But most importantly, we can all be loving. And when we're loving, things seem to work out better. When we're loving with ourselves, we tend to go through life more smoothly. When we're not so loving with ourselves, things seem to, every little thing seems to bother us. But when we are loving with ourselves, then we're more able to give that away to others. And that's what we're here to talk about on our show, is how to be more loving with ourselves and how to connect with others in a loving way.
Exactly. And then that's a wonderful introduction. And we know that we are all, as human beings, we are all sexual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sex is a core part of our lives, next to survival, probably the strongest feeling that we have. And it is interesting that how in different cultures, different nations, we see that human sexuality is filtered, it is taboo, it is disconnected, nobody wants to talk about it. And those that they actually come and talk about it, they are labeled, they are shamed, they are, so many negative comments are associated with their sexuality. The reason, today I want to talk about, as you and I discussed it, before, about sexual abuse and how it can over time cause a condition in both men and women as hypersexuality.
Correct.
Right. So usually everybody talks about lack of desire.
Mm-hmm.
Men have a main issue about lack of desire, and then women primarily are, told that they have low desire or lack of desire to have sex. But we seldom talk about hypersexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in men, they talk about hypersexuality, but then again, they associate that with obsessive compulsive disorder. They associate that with addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are, there are different labels that they give to a man that's hypersexual,
Mm-hmm.
right? We don't see that for women, though, right?
Right.
But then again, when we are talking about hypersexuality, still, aside from the sexual abuse,
Mm-hmm.
right, we want to look at many factors to see what is actually hypersexuality? Why do we call it hypersexuality? I can understand hypersexuality maybe happening to a man who's like maybe 80 years old. So if they go out of the norm of what an 80-year-old man wants to have sex, probably that can be, depending on the criteria of the diagnosis at the time, that can be considered as hypersexual.
Well, I don't know that it's just age. It's not, I mean, it's not, and I'm saying that because I'm on my way to 80.
But you're got
no,
more
no, no,
years to
and I don't want to think that when I'm 80, I'm done for as far as sex, but I don't think it's just age. I think it's how driven the person is,
Right.
right?
Okay,
Yeah.
I take that, but usually somebody who's 80, an 80-year-old man doesn't have the same, hypersexual urges as a 20-year-old has.
Right.
So there is a difference there,
Mhm.
right? So one of the reasons I picked up this topic is because I came across to a client, and she's 20 years old, never been, in sexual activity before. But then again, she knows about her genital and sexuality and, sexual feelings through masturbation. And recently she, felt a sensation in her genital area that gives her discomfort and actually is very painful, right? So she's gone through several doctors and she was told that she has this condition called vulvodynia, right? Okay, however, that wasn't really confirmed, and she recently went to a gynecologist that she was told that she has this condition called persistent genital arousal disorder, in short PGAD, right? So she's 20 years old. 20 years old is a peak time for a female to have sexual urges, just like a man, right? And the fact that this woman culturally is not able to have sex before marriage, right? It doesn't mean that she doesn't have sexual urges.
Correct.
It doesn't mean that she's not supposed to feel sexual,
Right?
It doesn't mean that because she has sexual urges that she is hypersexual at the age 20. In particular, when she doesn't have sex with anybody, right? Just because she wakes up in the morning, sometimes she feels aroused. I don't know that that's an abnormal condition, right?
Right.
In particular, to give it a persistent genital arousal disorder at age 20, to somebody from a culture whose sex is in their culture is taboo, and she cannot even talk about her sexuality.
So.
But it doesn't mean that her body and her mind are disconnected from this natural, phenomena in human life, right?
Right.
And then I looked up, to see exactly what this persistent genital arousal disorder is, and only to find out that this diagnosis is not included in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, which is DSM-5 through the American Psychiatric Association. And it's not even included in the International Classification of Diseases, which is ICD-10. And this manual is designed by World Health Organization, WHO. And there is this organization which is in much smaller capacity called the International Consultation on Sexual Medicine, or ICSM, that actually, introduced this diagnosis back in 2003, right? And then, and since then, still, because there is not enough research on it, and because there is not enough evidence about it, it has not been included in these two main books, right? Manual, right?
Right.
So I don't know. I'm trying to understand here. What can be called hypersexual in female, and then what can be called hypersexual in male, that can fall into the categories that we have, right? If sexual abuse is one of the factors that over time can cause hypersexuality, and this female client, there is a huge possibility that she has been molested during her childhood, right? So we can say yes, that sexual abuse can be one of the causes of hypersexuality in adulthood, right?
Correct.
But then again, we want to know, we want to be able to separate these things from each other, separate conditions from each other. Is a 20-year-old hypersexual, hyper arousal, or is it the same as the 40-year-old, the same as the 60-year-old, the same as the 80-year-old? I mean, how do we decide what is hypersexual for a person? I guess that's where my kind of stuck place is.
Yeah.
If it is not addiction, if it is not compulsive behavior, then what causes us to say it's hypersexual?
Well, I also I want to question you about, because you said there were two things, and one is you're saying hypersexual, the other you were saying there was pain.
Right.
So, and I don't know that the two necessarily go together.
They don't go together. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah,
yes.
and was the woman, this young woman who went to the gynecologist, was she going there because of the sexual urges, or was she going there because of the pain, or was she going there because of both?
She was going there because of the pain, and then she was told that the pain is because she's hypersexual.
Oh.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot find any diagnosis, any criteria, any manual that can tell me that if a female at the age 20 has genitalia pain and she feels sexual, then she is, her pain is because of the hypersexuality.
Right.
Right. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Right. Then again, I want to take all of this from abnormality. It's one thing for us to label, a person and give them a diagnosis. But then again, we also need to be able to make sense of that diagnosis. How can we bring genitalia pain next to hypersexuality, especially at the age 20, and then also we need to also consider the environmental factor. That means the culture, the religion, the openness to talk about sexuality, any experience related to sexuality.
Correct.
Right? So I don't believe that these are considered, but these are the facts that we need to consider when we want to tell somebody that they are hypersexual, based on what conditions we can introduce that. So
and also, what is the purpose of
what
the
is the
diagnosis?
purpose of diagnosis?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes. So let's talk about this more after our commercial break.
Absolutely. There.
Welcome back to commercial break. This is Heart-to-Heart program at KMET 1490 PM ABC News Radio. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Albert here. We would like to invite you to please call us at 951-922-3532. I don't know why I say 818, because I think that's our regular.
Well, you're an 818 girl.
Yeah, I'm the 818 girl, and I'm proud of it. I'm a Valley girl, yes. 951-922-3532. You may also visit us at our YouTube at heart-2-heart.online/YouTube. And for those of you who are just, joining us, we're talking about the topic of hypersexuality among both male and female. And we talked about this condition called persistent genital arousal disorder that applies to women. But then again, we're questioning, how can we do that to a 20-year-old who has never had sex with anybody and doesn't know what exactly intercourse mean, and she has normal regular sexual urges, and why is that persistent genital arousal disorder? I just,
Well, yeah, we can't know why the diagnosis was made unless we
yeah,
actually talk to the doctor. But but we were talking, before the break about what the purpose of a diagnosis is if there is no treatment,
exactly.
right?
Yes, she was told that go to a therapist.
Right,
So then, thankfully, we know that there is no organic cause for that,
right.
right? Because she was told that to go to a therapist, and then so that's a good news. However, when we give this kind of a diagnosis with big words to a 20-year-old, it's good enough for them to panic
Hmm.
and hate sex for the rest of their lives.
Well, okay.
Well, that's what she told me.
Well,
know?
I don't know that
Yes.
a diagnosis, to given to a 20-year-old would do that, but certainly in addition to the issues that she's facing, which you've shared with me, that she has, parents who are
Right.
basically telling her that she shouldn't be sexual.
Right.
When you add that to the mix, then certainly it can be very damaging.
It is. It is, and that's exactly what I'm referring to,
Mhm.
right? So, in addition to that we talked, uh, if we want to look at from hypersexuality among both genders, male and female, one of the main contributing factor is childhood sexual abuse,
Mhm.
right? We know that, actually the report suggests that sexual abuse at any age may kind of predict hypersexuality, right? And this is coming from the Journal of Sexual Medicine.
Well, I think it can be both hyper or hyposexuality.
Right. Well, this one is talking about hyper, right?
Right.
And then, but then again, they said that sexual abuse is with the condition of hypersexuality is stronger in men who have experienced abuse as children and during their teen years.
Hmm.
Right.
Well, again, I want to say, they say it's stronger in men, but that also may be because of it's maybe very underreported with women.
Yes.
So, and women have a lot more body shame and are shamed a lot more about their sexuality.
Correct.
So they may not be reporting it.
Right.
It may be more valid in men. We don't know. We don't know. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just that and that's exactly so this information is good to have in one hand. In the other hand, it can be I don't want to say misleading, but it doesn't provide accurate information
Hmm.
for people who are diagnosed with hypersexuality to understand it about themselves.
Right.
Right? So it just becomes another label, which is painful. It's a painful situation for somebody to endure, to carry with themselves. Oh, guess what? I've been diagnosed as hypersexual.
Hmm.
Right? So basically, when we talk about hypersexuality, we're talking about a condition where individuals experience sexual urges and behaviors that are difficult to control, causing great distress, and then sexual thoughts and actions may be so frequent and intense that they interfere with a person's ability to work and manage everyday life. Okay. Yes, so that's correct. So relationships usually suffer because of that. They are, risky sexual behaviors such as unprotected, intercourse and so on. So again, if I look at that, yes, if the person is so unable to manage life, right, as a result of the frequent urges that they have, right? I did have clients that this woman, she needed to masturbate every hour in order to be able to focus, right? I have had men that they told me they have to masturbate, like again, the same way, right? Or even they wake up at the middle of the night and they have to masturbate before they can go back to sleep, right? And then in the morning, when they go to the office, they have to go to the bathroom and masturbate and go back to work. which causes them, delay of productivity and, attending to work and getting comments and, attending to meetings and leaving the meetings to masturbate and then again go back. So yes, that exactly is hypersexuality, right? But then again, these reports, they don't talk about the age. They don't talk about the condition. They don't talk about other factors. And in particular for female, for a 20-year-old to be told that they are hypersexual, where many women that I know, they don't work, so this situation doesn't interfere with their work activity or educational activity or their daily functionings to begin with, right? So just because somebody has sexual urges, we can't just call them hypersexual.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. When labels are very, very, very damaging.
They are.
Yeah.
They are.
And especially when there's no explanation given to what it could possibly stem from, and also what can possibly be done about it.
Right.
It's sort of like somebody coming in and going, "Oh yeah, you have two tongues. Okay, I'll see you next week."
Right.
Well, what are you supposed to do with that information?
Right. Exactly. Yes. And we know that, prior research have indicated that there is an association between sexual abuse and hypersexuality, right? But, none of these reports were able to, basically say how each gender is going to be impacted differently, right? So then again, that's also, we realize that that's specific to the person, specific to the condition that they have been molested or raped, or however that sexual, contact has happened, right? And then how many times happened, the frequency of it, the intensity of it, right? These are all factors that can, increase or decrease or make that hypersexuality at the level that actually can be normalized, or it can be a condition that can interfere with many aspects of an individual life. However, we know that about female, that hypersexuality is an area that is far less researched than it is on men, and primarily one of the reasons that women don't talk about their hypersexuality, like you said, is cultural factor. It's definitely underreported. It's definitely women are. It's easier for them to avoid their sexuality, the feelings. It's easier for them to become non-responsive. Many of them are called in this condition, cold fish, right? So that's even more acceptable for women than for them to step forward and talk about their high sexual desires.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And then, therefore, as a result of that, research in this area is very limited. So, excuse me. For this reason, when this organization, International Consultation on Sexual Medicine, ICSM, started this research, organizations such as ICD-9, and also DSM-5, both of them, they rejected the idea to include them in as one of the criteria for female sexuality, because the research was very limited, the sample size was very limited, and actually it wasn't accurate either. They said that their research suggested, based on the sample size, that in each one woman in each 100, thousand is no, it's in 100 women is hypersexual.
Oh, 1%.
1%, right? And then in the other areas, they realized that it's even much lower than that, right? So I can see the underreporting of the factor. And I can also see that, we are far away from the area where we can intelligently and accurately say that, if a woman is hypersexual, it is persistent genital arousal disorder, right? we need to be very careful and very mindful about, you know, these diagnoses, and look at each person's condition individually. It's not one size fits all. In particular, when it comes to sexuality, yes, there are, you know, certain criteria that they include some very frequent, you know, conditions. So we can cluster them and put them as criteria, and they say if somebody falls between those criteria, their condition, they can be diagnosed as such. However, again, within that, we have, you know, individual conditions that needs to be considered before we very firmly say that so and so has this diagnosis or give a diagnosis to a person. So we can't, you know, meet with somebody within 5 minutes, tell them, oh, guess what, you have this diagnosis. Right? That's not accurate, especially in the field of medicine. You know, that cannot be done without considering so many other factors that impact a person's life and their sexuality.
Yeah, and I also want to add that the idea of diagnosing an emotional disorder, I think it started with the idea that only psychiatrists could treat mental disorders.
Right.
And for a long time, psychiatrists were the only ones that are allowed to treat mental disorders.
Right.
And it became sort of a political thing, where when people who studied the mind and became psychologists, they were not allowed to treat mental disorders because the psychiatrists, the associations of the psychiatrists tried to keep them out. And so then psychiatrists were given the task of dealing with all mental and emotional disorders. Psychologists weren't even allowed to. And then with the advent of master level therapists, marriage and family therapists, licensed clinical social workers, for a long time, they were not allowed to say that they were therapists. They were only allowed to be called counselors. And that was because the psychologists and the psychiatrists associations wanted to keep all the people treated by them.
Yes.
So,
and prescribe medicine.
And prescribe medication, and not recognizing that people who didn't have a medical degree were just as capable, and in some cases even more capable, of helping people with emotional disorders. So the whole idea of making it a disorder and creating the DSM, which is the Manual of Mental Disorders, was actually started by psychiatrists to try to keep everything medical, so that it would appear to the public that they needed to still continue to seek psychiatric help, when in fact seeing a marriage and family therapist or a clinical social worker or a psychologist would be just as valid.
Exactly. So, you know, there is always a motive beyond, you know, what's happening and what's being reported and what's being diagnosed. And, you know, I don't want to say that everybody's diagnosis is questionable. No, that's not the point. But we want to know that, we want to point out that when we are given a diagnosis for somebody that we don't have a good history information from them, we can't just label them and then send them home.
Well, not only that, but it can be very detrimental.
Yes.
Because if you give someone a diagnosis, that diagnosis can stick with them even when the diagnosis is no longer applicable.
Yes.
For example, if you give somebody a diagnosis of a generalized anxiety disorder, does that mean that the person at age 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 is always going to have that label, and they're always going to have a generalized anxiety disorder, no matter how much therapy they get or no matter how well they can function now?
Well, that's you know, actually, you know, that's a very good point, because now we see that through many these you know, healthcare systems, pre-existing conditions are waived, and I think that's one of the reasons that pre-existing conditions are waived, because if somebody has, you know, like anxiety at the age 20, it doesn't mean by the age 40 they still carry that. But the insurance company, they used to, use that against the person and not give them the policy that they wanted. Or, I mean, I'm not familiar with that, so that's an insurance agent job. But I know that pre-existing condition was a roadblock to getting good health coverage.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So we talked more about this topic right after -2-heart.online/YouTube, and Dr. Robert and Dr. Mitra talking about a condition called hypersexuality among both male and female, and what research says about it. So we talked about many aspects of it and how to basically look at a person's condition versus just giving them a straightforward diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Right.
Right.
So when it comes to hypersexuality, as a result of childhood or teen years sexual abuse, right, there are many factors to look at, right? I know that, during childhood, bedwetting is one of the conditions that happens as a result of, sexual abuse.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
I know that, fear of going to sleep, fear of being alone, right? Fear of rejections, fear of even sharing about what happened or common conditions, right? But then again, to be hypersexual as a result of that, it actually can be true, right? And the reason is because, in particular, when a child becomes introduced with their genital sensation, and in certain conditions, they establish that as a form of a relationship with another person, and they feel like we're going to hear attachments and all of that, which is by itself is a different topic. But especially when that becomes kind of persistent condition, the person, associates herself or himself as a, hypersexual person. It kind of gives them different level of connection, gives them different level of understanding of themselves. Their selfhood, kind of shifts from the direction that they had in a healthy way and gives them a different perspective of who they are.
Yeah. So my one of the ways that I look at it is that if a child of any age, a child of any age, is stimulated sexually, and they're stimulated as a young person who, and the feelings of sexual stimulation are very powerful and very overwhelming, that it sort of develops a premature appetite for that sexual feeling.
Right.
And it gets split off from their personality, so that their sexuality becomes something separate from them, not integrated, and therefore they develop an appetite for the sexual stimulation without understanding and being able to connect that with who they are. So the sexual stimulation begins to overtake them and causes them to have that desire at times, which are not really connected at all with their desire for closeness or relationship. It's just that they want that feeling because that feeling has been stirred up in them at a time when it was too overwhelming and they didn't know what to do with it.
And then that's so true, and that overwhelming situations can happen obviously in adulthood when person goes, experiences anxiety, stress, right, or depression. Those are all overwhelming situations, and then so it's normal to go after what they remember of a condition that made them feel better about themselves.
Right.
So.
Right.
Sexuality, sexual activity can release some of the stress, some of the anxiety, right?
Well, certainly, getting sexually excited and then orgasm can reduce the anxiety and releases oxytocin and different chemicals in the body. But what we're talking about is when someone stimulates a child, it's not the child's choice. So the child then sees the sexuality, the feelings of sexuality as existing outside of them. And their bodies are reacting to something that's foreign to them, but that feels overwhelmingly good. And so that feeling can become sort of like an addiction.
Right.
And I think that's what we're talking about when we talk about hypersexuality. Is it's sort of like an addiction to the feeling which has been split off from them. It's like it's being imposed on them.
Right.
And so the feeling of wanting to get excited becomes a repetition compulsion to the abuse that they suffered.
Exactly. And then, so that's a different condition to talk about. That's a different dynamic to talk about and explore, instead of just giving, that's the actual dynamic that we need to explore, instead of just sending a person home with a label that they don't know what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if hypersexuality, is one of the conditions that happens as a result of childhood, or any age, sexual abuse, then we need to think about how we can help a person to overcome this condition.
Right.
Obviously, the person is not able to overcome it by themselves,
mm-hmm.
because they, they're
caught in it.
Yeah, they're caught in it, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely psychotherapy with the help of somebody who's experienced in human sexuality is definitely recommended. We have many forms of addictions, but when it comes to sexual addiction, again, we need somebody who specializes in that.
Someone who specializes in sexuality as well as trauma.
As well as trauma,
because the issue is that the sexuality of the person has been traumatized.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. And then, this situation, the person, based on my experience, they carry with them, a significant amount of shame and guilt and fear of, other people know about their condition, shame, guilt of, maybe they contributed to the situation, and the shame associated with that they are bad because, they have been causing the situation. And then usually that's what the perpetrator, impose on them, especially if the perpetrator is somebody that is known to the child, right? And we know that per statistic that majority of children who are sexually molested, they know who their perpetrator has been.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And usually it's somebody very close to them, like a family member, or somebody that is, for the family, is a trustworthy person.
Trustworthy friend.
Yeah.
An uncle, an aunt,
Right. Even brother, even father, even grandparent.
Cousin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody that they know, and then the child is left with the experience of their sexuality flowering before they're emotionally ready to integrate it. Yeah. And so they're also left with an ambivalence about talking about it. Number one, because of the loyalty that they have to whoever it is that's doing it, as well as because their bodies are responding and they don't understand that. And it feels good, but at the same time, they recognize there's something not right about it.
Exactly. Yes, something not right about it, and they don't have anybody to talk about it.
Correct.
Right. So that's such a, a lone place to be in, to try to figure out how to make sense out of what happened, make sense out of their physical experiences and the reaction and the sensation that they had, how to make sense of that, right? And then how to resolve it for themselves.
Yes.
Which usually, most of the time, finally goes back in hiding, and the person is unable to share it because of the fear. And then ultimately, it may show itself in one of the conditions is maybe hypersexuality. Right? So when somebody experiences that and they believe they are hypersexual, the recommendation is to first don't panic, because we don't know why hypersexuality is happening, right?
Right.
So there is no point to go ahead and assume conditions. We don't want to do that. We don't want to assume that their condition is unique to them and there is no resolution for it, right?
Right.
So with the help of therapists, each person who experiences hypersexuality, they are able to investigate in their lifetime what happened and how the situation took place, what has been their part. For the most part, their part just usually ends up being at the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person. That's been their contribution. So if you want to look at it, if they have contributed.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's been very difficult for people to recognize that they are blameless in certain situations when other people have hurt them, taken advantage of them.
Yeah.
Especially if they don't have any emotional support, where other people are saying, "Hey, your feelings are valid and your feelings matter," and and if something has happened, it's important that you deal with this, meaning that you be able to understand it and experience yourself as a good person while you're healing from it.
Exactly, and this condition in particular is important for female hyperarousal condition to know, because on female, there are different impositions, and one of the main comment that's given to women, well, they must have done something for this to happen to them. Right?
Yeah,
and that's
blaming the victim.
That's blaming the victim. Usually, parents tell that to their female child, or teachers say that to the female child, that the female has in some way contributed to the condition, whether it is from their outfit that they were wearing, to be there at the wrong time according to the perpetrator or the parents, or any other condition. Usually society is able to point at the female rather than the perpetrator as a causation of the condition. But we see that far less in male abused children than we see it in female.
Right. And I want to talk more about this because we're running out of time, I think. But I want to say that we are more likely, if let's say in a case of where a man is accused of rape, and the woman is in court and she's saying this guy raped me, the jury is more inclined to side with the perpetrator, especially the females on the jury, which you would think, wow, that seems ridiculous. But the reason is the women don't want to think that it could have been them. So they want to believe that there's something the woman could have done to prevent it.
Right.
And so that they don't have to put themselves in the position of the victim and think that they could be victimized as well. So they're more likely to side with the perpetrator, unfortunately.
And some of them are actually afraid of the perpetrator, because the perpetrator gives them these, signals through looks and all of that frightens the jury.
Right.
And, if the person is known to the family, most of the time, the family members don't want to talk about the perpetrator because of the loss of respect or false accusations and usually that's the case. So we need to talk more about this in a future program, and we thank you for sharing your hour with us. I'd like to invite you to please join us tomorrow at 9 a.m. with another episode of Trauma, Codependency, Addictions, and Relationship with Dr. Robert Jaffe and myself, and also next Thursday at 3 p.m. this time, so for another episode of Human Sexuality. And please don't forget to stay in touch with us. Until then, don't forget, all you need is love.
All you need is love.
Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Serving the Inland Empire and desert communities, this is KMET, Manning, Beaumont, Redlands, and Palm Springs, 1490
From
AM.
ABC News. I'm Daria Albinger. More than a week after the election, President Trump is still refusing to concede, and the top Republican in the House is among the GOP brass supporting that.
As the Trump campaign continues to mount legal challenges in a number of states, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy arguing
every recount needs to be finished. You got challenges inside courts. Every challenge needs to be heard.
President-elect Joe Biden now leads Trump nationwide by more than 5 million votes. In Georgia, where Biden leads by more than 14,000 votes, the recount is being done by hand. And as